Recovered alcoholic, my name's Tony. I'd like to welcome everybody to Thursday Night Big Book Study Workshop of the program of recovery laid out by the first 100 men and women in our first portion. How we open this meetings with the serenity prayer. What do we need for a good meeting? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thanks for everybody being here, everybody being online. Welcome. We had quite the Zoom bombers on there. It was quite the show. But anyways, it's good, you know. I mean, that's the level of some people's entertainment. They should have hung around with us for a little while, right? We'll show you funny, right? Anyhow, it's kind of cool. Like, for those who've been following along, each step moves into the next one, right? There's a transition. And they used to say if you're having a problem with a certain step, it's because you don't understand the previous step. That's the bottom line, right? So the confusion usually is a lot of people go with other people's ideas what the steps are instead of going through it for themselves and finding out what it actually says, where the information comes from, and reading the literature. Because when you read the literature, it becomes quite clear on a sequence, right? And it makes a lot of sense, right? The only time it doesn't make sense if you have a treatment-based idea, or your sponsor isn't familiar with this process, or they got taught certain things, and they just continue to look at it the way they look at it instead of seeing what it actually says, right? So one of the things which is consistent with this group, we seem to disturb a lot of people when they get introduced to this thing, because what they're really struggling with is not what we're saying, is what they think it says, right? And so we'll present what the book says, and then all of a sudden the argument happens in the brain. Nobody's had that here, right? and so upon further investigation, so where we're at page 60, and we kind of finished up last week. So, and we agnostics, I was talking to my friend, who are you?
I'm Chad. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Sobriety dates, October 2016. Very grateful to be here, sober by the grace of God in this process that I did almost 8 years ago.
Awesome. Where's Joanne tonight?
Joanne's currently heading up to the Western Canada Regional Forum hosted in Vernon. She has to go a day early because they're doing their ASC meeting. That's the BC Yukon Area 79. She's our registrar, and I will be blasting up there tomorrow.
Yeah, like love and service, right? There's a lot to ensure this is here, not only for those who have yet to come here, but for generations down the road. Like it was here for us when we got here. Took a lot of work from those that went before us, right? Because, you know, we're good idea people, right? I have a better idea on how to do this. I have a better idea, right? And so it's in good hands. So one of the things on the review is we're talking earlier, and a lot of people think Step 3 is on page 63. That's the conclusion of moving on. But the introduction to Step 3, anybody know where the introduction to Step 3 is? Nobody? Who doesn't want to get involved? I ask a question, everybody starts like...
About 44.
So it'd be on page 44. Well, why would you say that? Well, when we kind of look at page 44 and we look at it, we've seen in the preceding chapters we've learned something of alcoholism, and we found out it's for lack of better words, a twofold illness consisting of two symptoms. A lot of times we hear it's three symptoms, right? But the book really clear on the idea it's two symptoms, right? Treatment center-based ideas is a lot of us become alcoholic because of the spiritual malady, right? Well, the book doesn't support that idea, right? The reason we become alcoholic is why? We have an allergy to alcohol, right? We're abnormal when it comes to ingesting alcohol. How many people thought we were normal and the people that couldn't drink were abnormal? Mm-hmm. So he looks at his wife. Easy over there. Well, yeah, and I get that, right? Because my wife's a normie, right? Like, that should be one of the questions on the 20 questions. If you complain about your partner who's a normal drinker, right? Like, my wife, and refer to them as a normie, right? My wife's a normie, and like, we go camping, I just, the way she drinks just boggles my mind, right? I just, like, you know, like, if I could drink like her, I'd do it all day, right? So, So in the preceding chapters, we've learned something of alcoholism, which is really cool is as we went through there, we've seen that there was progression in the development of understanding. And on page 30, they gave us a lot of information leading up to the recapping of the information and expanding on it, right? And one of the things they talked about is this obsession of the idea that we could control and enjoy our drinking. So we see that's a pre-step one condition, right? Because if you're still obsessed with that idea that you could control and enjoy your drinking, or you still want to drink, have you done step one? Nope. Right? So that's it. And usually that's a lack of understanding. That's why they went further down. It says, we learned that we fully had to concede to our innermost selves. Go ahead.
We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed.
So what's the first thing that we're smashing is the idea that we could control and enjoy our drinking. But in order to understand that, you need to be explained the allergy. And when you explain the allergy, now you start to get a better understanding why you haven't been able to drink with impunity, right? Because beforehand, how many people thought they had a consequence problem? Right? Makes sense, right? I don't really have a drinking problem, I have a consequence problem. So when you come into the fellowship, you hear all these people talking about step one, they talk about all the consequences, right? I've never had an impaired driving charge. Have I ever driven impaired? I hardly drove sober, right? So, but I've never had an impaired charge, right? I've lost jobs sober and drinking. Anybody? Mm-hmm. A couple of people. Oh, there's still a chance.
Retired instead.
Oh, retired instead. So we see this is in regards to the physical component. And why is that important to understand the first part, and to concede to, yes, I have this thing and that I can never safely drink again. Then they move into the second question, right? If you don't have the allergy, does it matter that you drink? You'd be normal, right? You wouldn't have the phenomenon of craving. You wouldn't be drinking past your mind's ability to stop you, right? You'd be able to, given good reasons, stop, moderate, go home after work, not spend the rent money. Like it goes on and on and on, right? Mm-hmm. Wake up with the same person you went to bed with. I mean, that kind of stuff. Moving on really fast. Yeah. So when we see we have this condition and I could never safely drink again, most people who get to this stage are already at the places I don't want to drink. They're already there, right? Most people who are still dealing with the consequences don't really want a solution, and they're biding some time to get the monkey off their back, right? I have court problems, financial problems, this problem, that problem, and as soon as these problems are done, then I'm out of here. Right? I don't know, nobody like that here. But, so once I understand this physical part, then it moves into the second part. So from page 30 to 33, they talk about the physical component. They give examples why it's important that we have to smash the idea that we could ever safely drink, that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, that we'll never be immune to alcohol. Does that kind of make sense? So then the question is, how do I stop, including weekends and holidays? That's important, right? How do I find myself in a position where I don't keep on repeating the desperate experimentation of the first drink, where I keep relapsing? Because most of us, right, get to a place where, why am I drinking against my own will? Why am I doing all this effort and still find myself drinking? I'm going to treatment, I've been to AA, I've been to counseling, I swore off forever, was solid most, I would have passed the lie detectors test, anybody? And I still find myself drinking. So that's the second component that they introduced us to the idea, which was the malady on page 23. They started it off on page 21 by saying, well, what about the real alcoholic? Right? Because we have all the good reasons to stop, and were you able to stop? So we find we continue to do so. So here, the second kind of thing that they talk about here is on page 34. And this is the second kind of, the first one was the allergy. So we look back in our drinking history. Yeah, I see this phenomenon of craving. I see that I'm thinking about the next drink before I'm finished the first drink. I see if I have enough supply. Anybody, am I kind of singing the right tune? Last call, I order more than enough, and I'm trying to think. Everybody's trying to get their booze out of the bar at last call. No, not everybody. My girlfriend's purse always was bigger than needed to be because you could put right? My pockets always put beer in it. Everybody clinks when they leave the hotel, right? And they never notice the pitcher missing. Maybe me. Anybody else? Sneak the booze out of the... I really don't notice. Then you ever get, when you get sober, you see that drunk person trying to steal. It's like, oh my God, that's what I look like. Because we think we're like, hey, yeah, I'm cool. And that's what we think in the mind is like, I'm talking like that. But we're like, you think you steal that? Can you fit another one in there?
Trying to do it all discreetly.
Can I have your number? I'd really like to get together with you. Okay, anyhow. Oh my God. Anyway, I don't know why I go there sometimes. So the question here is the next part. Page 34, for those. And this is the next question, right? Because this is important. A lot of people don't know how to answer this because part of a sponsor's job is to help you have a step one experience, right? Because most people, what's their first obsession? Self, and keeping self sober. Listen to anybody that's come in AA. After 3 meetings, they're telling us how they're going to do it. Right? They even start sponsoring people day 4.
Or the people that always have a plan.
The plan,
people always come back and they have a plan. This time I'm going to do this differently. Yep.
And that's it. So the next question in good sponsorship and through the study is this. For those...
Second paragraph, page 34. For those who are unable to drink moderately, the question is how to stop altogether. We are assuming, of course, that the reader desires to stop. Whether such a person can quit upon a non-spiritual basis depends upon the extent to which he has already lost the power to choose whether he will drink or not.
And so that's interesting because you hear people in the fellowship say they have a choice. So it's confusing. So just don't drink, just don't pick up. Anybody ever hear this? You know, don't take the first one. It's not the caboose that kills you. It's the engine. You hear all this nice stuff. We don't drink no matter what. Anybody hear that stuff? Meeting makers make it. And it sounds good, right? How many people were hoping that would have worked for them? Oh, yeah. Damn, then I wouldn't have to do this, and I'd be sitting in a 12 and 12 down the street, right? Talking about Bill's experience, hoping it would be mine. Because it won't matter. They'll be able to keep themselves sober, giving good. For now. A good example of that guy of man of 30. Right?
After 4 years.
Yeah, so, he stayed sober for a long time. And the book talks about that sometimes we think that a long-term sobriety will enable us to drink like other people. Well, why would we think that? Because we never really did step one the first time or had a step one experience. And I know a lot of people who came into the fellowship, like myself, at a younger age, given good reason, were able to stop. And then as time went on, 18 years, one of my sponsors, I always tried to get him into this, but he never really seen the need of it because he was doing fine with himself. He got a job back, got the girlfriend, got everything back. He was doing really good, practicing certain principles. He was able to recreate his life. But then at 18 years, life started to go sideways, and he started thinking, well, I was more of a cokehead than I was an alcoholic. Right? Maybe I will be able to safely have a drink because I really never had a problem with alcohol before. So what could you tell this person? Nothing. The twist has happened. There's nothing you can tell them. Right? So then, based on this idea that he would be able to drink like other people because his duration of time, which is an act of insanity, the takeover of the mind, the inability to see things clearly, he started drinking. And that was probably 4 years ago, and he still hasn't made it back. Right now, he's like the man of 30, given all good reason. And the hard part is he's trying to be his own solution as he was the first 18 years. And if anybody ever relapse here? How many people thought they were successful before? Look how much time I got. Yeah, look how much time you got. Say it slowly. Right? You got 3 months. You didn't get much time at all in the big picture. Right? We're looking at longevity, the long game, right? So most people think, oh, look how successful I was before, instead of, man, I wasn't successful at all because this condition came back that I was trying to get away from the first time, right? So that's what they mean about on a non-spiritual basis. How well have you been able to do to keep yourself sober? Like I have my friend here, she came in fellowship, got reading the spiritual principles, she's been sober ever since, right? So, and that does happen. Like people are fortunate enough to come into the fellowship, get 12-step into a big book study, right? And haven't really experienced that sense of impending doom. But they have enough of a story where they get into our solution right away. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. And that's the step one experience, right? So here, what is the step one experience then? So did you notice every person that they talked about in the book so far all thought they'd be able to keep themselves sober based on their experience and self-knowledge? Right? So the best example that they talk about here, before going into it, they call this malady a phenomenon, an unexplainable event. The obsession is an explainable event. Right? It's the idea that I could control and enjoy my drinking. That's an explainable event. The malady that we're into now is an unexplainable event. That's why they kind of talk about how shall we help our readers to determine, on page 34 at the bottom.
Page 34, bottom, how then shall we help our readers to determine their own satisfaction, whether they are one of us? The experiment of quitting for a period of time will be helpful, but we think we can render an even greater service to alcohol sufferers. And
yeah, so you notice that they're not talking about the allergy anymore. Right? They're talking about the second sentence, whether you're one of us, those who are needing a spiritual experience or a spiritual solution to their problem. It's the solution, right, to the problem. That we don't apply to the problem, we apply to ourselves that relieve the problem. Right? So every time they talked about the spiritual solution or the 12 steps of the course of action, they talked about it as a solution to the dilemma of alcoholism. Yes? Mm-hmm. Right? And so on the next, so over here on page 40, this guy here, he talked about
Fred.
Good old Fred. So real fast, he says, I rather appreciate your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. I was confident it would not happen to me after what I've learned. How many people have you heard in AA say, I'm never drinking again? Mm-hmm. Right? And then they qualify it by going, the obsession is left, I don't think about it, so I'm in a place of neutrality. What they just told you is, one, either their sponsor hasn't started working with them yet. Two, their sponsor don't know what the hell they're talking about. They're not book-based, right? And three, the person who's making that statement don't understand alcoholism, right? So what has to happen, either they get into good sponsorship, somebody gets a hold of them that hear them talking at a meeting and 12-step them into a big book study where they go through this thing, or it takes another relapse to get their attention. Right? So he's saying, right, first drink, but I was confident it would not happen. So then he ends up drinking again. So on page 41, this is where, so has he had the step one experience on page 40 where he believes he's beyond human aid? No. Does he have a problem? Yes. Mm-hmm. But not a problem that he can't fix. What's our first obsession? Is that we can fix ourselves based on self-knowledge. We all qualify for that. Right? What convinces us otherwise is relapse or the inability to get longevity. Right? We keep on ending up at a place that we don't want to be. Anybody? Mm-hmm. So this guy ends up at that place again, and he's looking back on hindsight here on page 41. At the bottom. As soon as
I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not a thought of the consequences at all.
So that means something's taken over that's different than the idea that I could control and enjoy my drinking. The preemptive strike is today's Monday, maybe Friday I'll have a couple, and I'll just watch who I'm drinking with. I'll keep away from the tequila. I definitely won't do no methamphetamine. I'll stay away from the acid. And if I stay away from that bar, I should be okay. Maybe. And if I take a cab to where I'm going, but why would I take a cab that's drinking money? I'll just take a car and I'll just I'll go early, that way I can get a good seat. Okay, go ahead.
I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale.
So then on page 42, here's where he has the step one experience. This is our job as a fellowship when we're talking about step one, is to talk about those two symptoms. One is the allergy, and the second one is the malady of the mind. You need to be specific about that because most people think you're talking about the spiritual malady, right? And what our job is to disturb people about the question of alcoholism. Because most people think they can stay stopped. Listen to anybody, including 11 years in and out. My last relapse, 360 meetings in 90 days. I got a 3-month chip. I remember it April 8th. And I talked like I was getting an Academy Award. I was staying sober forever. The promises were coming true, and I know the lights adjusted, and it was great. It was one of the best talks I ever gave for somebody that didn't have a clue what they were talking about. But nobody else knew either. They're all like, "Wow, that was profound." Like, yeah, a couple old timers, like, "What the hell is he talking about?" Okay. So, anyways, they had said,
Two of the members,
written right at the top.
right at the top.
Again.
Top of page 42. They had said that though I did raise a defense, it would one day give away before some trivial reason for having a drink. Well, just that did happen and more. For what I had learned of alcoholism did not occur to me at all. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help in those strange mental blank spots.
So he confirms what the book's been saying all along, and then he adds a couple other things too. That right? It talks about willpower, right? And where the first time they introduced us to that idea was in regards to the malady on page 23 of rising from our lethargy and exerting our power of will. But the problem is the needed power isn't there. Why? To create the change in our psyche sufficient enough for us to recover from this illness. As long as this illness is present that we can't see, feel, and touch, because if we could see, feel, and touch it, then you could treat the illness, right? We don't. That's why we don't treat the illness. We have a treatment for it. Big difference, right? Because if you could see, feel, and touch it, if you knew when you were going to relapse again, how many people would just apply the steps then?
Like that ability to call your sponsor if you think you're about to drink, all those things. That may apply sometimes. Some people do have the ability to do that, but you can say no 99 times, but that 100th time, it's going to come out of nowhere and it's going to slap you in the ass.
So here he sees that he's beyond human aid. And he has a step one experience by realizing that it's going to happen again. That step one actually means I'm going to relapse 100%. A lot of people teach that when I do step one, I should be able to stay sober. Anybody ever hear that? That's not our literature. That's not our example. If you feel good about step one, you haven't done it. Right? Remember the guy earlier? You met Carl Jung. He was had all the money at his disposal. Right? He had such a profound inner workings of his mind that he thought relapse was unthinkable. Remember that guy? Right? And then he relapses. He goes back to the doctor. The doctor says, tell me the truth. The doctor says, I've never seen one case as such as yours ever recover. You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. So what's the mind of a chronic alcoholic? What symptom is that? The malady, right? It's an unexplainable event. So how do they explain an unexplainable event? This is the characteristic. This is what it looks like. And if you've never experienced it, would you be able to identify with it? I explained that to my wife. She said, you tried to get sober for 11 years? I said, yeah, I did good here and there. She says, and you're proud of that? She said, you couldn't tell me this before we got married? And then I explained. She says, what? You show up meetings. I really never wanted to drink again from the first time, my first meeting. I didn't, what was available here, and I had an introduction to it. I made a beginning. I had a good life. Went to college. Things were doing good. And then the malady. So 11 years of good enough reasons to, sufficient reason to come back. Horrific. But nothing ever happened here sufficient enough to keep me here. Till I went through this, and I've never looked back. 35 years later, there must be something to this. So he has a step one experience. And then when we go with willpower, so on page 44, we understand what they're talking about now in the preceding chapters. And then here's where we qualify whether we want to move on or not. Right? Because if I don't need a spiritual experience, will I need to move on in the book? Mm-mm. But if I need a psychic change or spiritual experience, the continuation is the beginning of step 3. I'm making a decision. I need this thing, but I'm struggling with my own thinking. Anybody struggle with their own thinking at this point? Mm-hmm. So now they're not talking about alcoholism anymore. They start talking about the human condition and the perplexities and the thinking stumbling blocks that we have within our own mind. I know nobody here has that problem, right? Not even Ray. No, just. So we have these preconceived ideas. Anybody? So if they would have started this chapter off by going, well, choose your own God or your own conception, you'd be hooped. Because that's not the design of this thing. The design is, let us tell you our experience, let us tell you the purpose and the design of this thing as we take you through it. Then once you understand our experience and what we're offering, then it says choose your own conceptions. The developing of a plan or group of ideas sufficient enough for me to move on. Does that kind of make sense? So on the next page it says, what's our problem?
Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find that power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main objective is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem.
So I've just got to willing to go through this. And as we went through We Agnostics, we did that already. A lot of it is about navigating through our own understanding, or our own prejudice, or our own preconceived ideas to the bare minimum of, do I believe that there is something greater than me that I could get access to? Am I even willing to be willing? In other words, that's a nice way of saying, can you participate in the saving of your own life or what? Can you at least be willing to be willing? Okay, yeah, I'm willing to be willing. To do what? What am I willing to be willing to do at this point in time? Well, what are we getting ready to do? Is to do the rest of the course of action, right?
Keep going through the work.
That's it, because step 2 is a summary of the course of action that we need to take. So every time they talked about the solution in the book, did they talk about a course of action, a summary of the application of these things in people's lives? Right from the doctor's opinion. They became sold on the ideas contained in this book. Yes? Every time somebody talked about the solution, they were talking about their experience with the course of action. So what we're doing here is step 12. If you're new, what you're looking at is step 2, right? And what we talked about is the course of action that we took to allow us to have this experience that enable us to tap into this solution. So what happens first? The psychic change or access to this power? Is it hot in here? Everybody's just looking at me and saying, hold on. So yeah, we get access to the power. The confirmation of that, the byproduct is the psychic change or spiritual experience. As the result of what? As the result of this course of action. Where did we learn about the course of action? We learned about it in step 2. Yes? Step 2 is not about your relationship with God or your ideas or what you think or your conception. It's not about, it's about the course of action necessary to bring about this change that we offer as a solution. Yes? Pretty interesting when you kind of look at it that way. So now we understand what the problem is. We understand what the solution is. We understand the lack of power is our dilemma. We understand we could get access to have our own experience with this thing if I'm just willing to go through the rest of the book. Do I need to be happy about it? Right? No, it's just like participating. Just come walk with us. I don't believe it's okay. You'll be contacted soon. Right? You don't have, right? Are you willing to believe that there's something greater than you? When's your court date? Yes, there's something greater than you. Right? Okay. So we're in how is the beginning of this thing. We talked about it on page 55. You see where we're going in here. And remember last week we talked about 54, about our thinking process, that we're some result of everything we feel, thinking, right? Our actions are pre-governed by what's happening on an internal level. How many people find that surprising? That anybody ever realize before you take action, sometimes you're driven by certain emotion and ideas? They don't even actually have to be happening. Anybody ever apologize for things that you thought were happening that weren't happening? Yeah, I remember telling a boss once where to go when he was coming to give me a raise, but I thought he was coming to fire me. Anyways, that was nice. So moving on. So they talk about actually, go ahead.
Page 55. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God.
So we covered that, right? This feeling, this sixth sense, this thing that's always talked to you. What are you doing? You ever wonder what that voice is? Something inside of you is surprised by what you're doing. Hey, you do realize you'll kill us both here. Hey, buddy. Whoa, what are you doing? No, hold my beer. No. Okay. And then if you don't hear it that night, you ever hear it the next day? What's the matter with you? How many people's had that voice?
That internal chatter, looking in the mirror.
Yeah, I love the mirror one. Anybody? How many people's looked in the mirror, right in your head? What's the matter with you? Anybody? Nobody here?
Oh yeah.
But what's really cool is we wait for an answer. Okay.
If it's a good day, you'll hear an answer.
Because you're an asshole. No, anyway. So anyways, we get to how it works, and it's a summary. We see now that how it works is really for those who have been through it, to explain to those that haven't. And it's also to remind us the importance of staying the course within a meaning. And how it works corresponds with the traditions, right? That the primary purpose, all this stuff, like we see it becomes a package deal when they talk about we are responsible. Who is? Not everybody, but those who have been through this, right? There's something more important happening here than my rough day. Right? Sometimes life happens. You can come to a meeting and you get some support and stuff like that, which we've all done. But most of the time when we come to a meeting, we find somebody that's praying for the problems you're complaining about. Like some of us have been sober a while, and like, you ever think you'd be living the life you're living? So when we realize that what the things that it's our dilemma is really not our problem. Right? These things that we're complaining about are really not the issue, right? Because if we don't find a solution for this problem that's killing us, which is alcoholism, all these problems are just temporary anyways. That problem you're having with your job, don't worry about it. If you can't stay sober, you won't have it soon. The problem you're having with family, friends, don't worry about it. You won't have it soon. Right? That's how important. So, but when this problem's solved, we seem to find an answer for all the rest of our problems. And that's the most consistent thing said by everybody who went through this, is the collective experience that said, not only did we find a problem for this dilemma, but we found a solution that answered all our problems. Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
You should have seen this guy. Anyways, we don't got time to go into that. So he goes through, now they're talking about their experience, and they're talking about past tense. If you're new, you're talking present tense, right? And they talk about this rapid course of action that they went through, and then at the end of it, step 12, it says what? So this idea that we work on the steps all day is not supported in the big book. Right? That idea has you focused on something other than the actual intent of this thing. Right? What's the intent of this thing? Is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, yes? Yeah. So when you find this power, what becomes the focus? The power. So how many people have their driver's license here? How many people know people with a driver's license? So the idea is, you went through this rigorous course of action to get your driver's license. If you didn't pay attention, you would fail the test, yes? First the computer test, and then the actual road test. So it would be evident that you weren't paying attention, yes? And that's kind of like this. We're going through a vigorous course of action, and if you're not paying attention, it'll be evident. What will be evident is the test. Now the acid test Bill talks about, and it's not the micro, it's not that. It's the first time I heard the acid test. I think I like this place.
I actually thought that too.
Wow. When is that?
That's a great fucking test.
Purple microdot or double barrel? Anyways, window pane, what kind of acid you talking about? My sponsors say, you just be quiet here and relax, okay? So
Stay close.
So, I'm going to get you a choke collar. You keep it up. Okay. So the idea is, if it's about formulating this relationship where I have an experience with it, then does the focus become my relationship or what got me the relationship? The relationship. So everything that got me my license, I don't think about when I'm driving now. Right? I don't think, what did the manual say? Oh, yeah, left turn. If you got in a car and somebody still had their manual beside them, fast, what does it say? Well, brake. That's how George drives. You know what I mean? That's how George drives. But you get the gist of it, right? Once you've got your license, that would be like the psychic change your spiritual experience. The focus no longer becomes so much as all the things that got is now developing that. Growing and understanding and practicing and developing these principles, right? Certain ideas. So what does it say here? Look at step 12. What does it say? Page 60.
Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps.
So there we go. So that's the purpose, right? Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So actually the psychic change of spiritual experience happens before 12. The instructions on how to obtain that is in the first 88 pages, right? The forewords, the doctor's opinion, and the spiritual appendix. The recipe to get your license, your spiritual license, right, is actually in the previous. All the rest is designed to incorporate how to utilize that in all areas of your life. All these. That's why it says working with others, to the wives, the family afterwards, to the employers, a vision for you. How do I incorporate these principles of being of service to God and the people around me? How do I best do that? Because remember, they didn't have those chapters before they wrote the book. All they had was a course of action, right? And so by the time they put this together, they realized all these different areas that they had to practice all these principles in, right? And all those principles are an internal thing with all these areas. It's something that happens inside of us. It's no longer the stuff outside of us. If your focus is outside of you, then you're missing the whole point of this. It's like all the promises. It's an internal experience, not an external experience. But you wouldn't know that until you experienced it. You'll suddenly realize, like, you'll be amazed. Some people talk about the steps that don't even look somewhat thrilled. I'm totally amazed. If you want to inform your face or what? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
We tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
So that's it. That becomes the focus, the practicing these principles. Now they're going to give an outlay of what that looks like. Right? So beforehand, they talk about, here are the steps we took, which will bring about this change. If we don't have this change, then we've missed something. That means I need to go back. When I fail my driver's license, they'll this point, so I got to go back and see those areas that I missed. Yes? And that's the same like this course of action. By the time we get to a certain point in it, they say, is the work solid so far? Have we skimped on anything? Is it solid? Are we on solid ground? Right? And then he'll say stuff like, if we've carefully followed directions, we've begun to sense this, right? So it's a byproduct. Okay, go ahead. So here's a summary of what it looks like on the conclusion. I've gone through this.
Many of us exclaimed, what an order. I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints.
True. Look at the crowd. Can't be that hard. Look at the audience. Take a look around. Can't be that difficult, right, George? Take a look around. Look at these people. Oh my God! If it's working for them, I might have a chance. Right? Last time I
see you and think that.
That's right. Last time I seen a crowd like this was at pre-trial. Okay, go ahead.
To grow along spiritual lines, the principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection.
So we'll have an understanding of where we got to under our own power. We'll see what that looks like and what created that, and what's the byproduct of that. Where they say nothing happens in God's world by mistake, you'll get to see why it's all happened. Right? You got to listen to that, because people use that. Nothing happens in God's world by mistake. That's right. Let's look at why it happened. And it had really nothing to do with God, did it? Well, I don't like that. I go back to just saying it's God's fault. Yes. And when you make amends, you could tell them that.
Yeah.
I hope you learned something from this thing I did to you. Because nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Obviously, you had to learn something. You're welcome.
Did we not set the ball rolling?
That's right. So the guide is where self-will got me and what it looks like after by practicing these principles. We've seen that in Bill's story. He was able to move past where he was crippled before, or the insanity of alcohol would return, right? He talked about the human dilemma. Right, and the practicing of these principles to bring about relief. He was still plagued with himself. He wasn't plagued with alcoholism. He was plagued with the human dilemma. Right? Go ahead.
Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostics, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas.
Before and after what? Before and after the steps. You'll always be convincing yourself of the need to do this. Nobody will need, you won't need anybody's help. It's like, yow, that hurts. Well, you want to practice some principles? No, okay. Okay, what principles were you talking about? Go be of service. I don't want to be of service. Okay, suffer. Okay, no, go be of service. Go work with some new people. I don't want to work with new people. Okay, suffer. Okay, I'll go work with new people. God, that feels good. The resistance is strong with us. But it'll make me feel better. I like feeling bad. We noticed. Okay, go ahead.
A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought.
So ready? So we looked at the transition of making a decision that we need to have this thing. So from We Agnostics, page 44, it brings us to the introduction. You got to look at the wording here. Being
convinced. We were at step 3.
We're at step 3 now. So the transition period. Every part of this book, there's a transition into the next process, which is
that we decided to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Just what do we mean by that? And just what do we do?
So who's going to answer that question?
Do we do?
They are.
It's a do-do.
Do-do. They're going to answer that question based on their experience. Because do I have the experience of doing that yet? Right? So I need to be convinced. So they're going to tell us how they got convinced. Right? I'm convinced that I need a psychic change or spiritual experience. But I'm not totally convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. Because I don't know what that looks like. Because when I'm doing good, I do really good. I don't see it. I deal with life in intervals of either a day or 2 days or a week. I'm doing good this week. Well, what about the last 3 weeks? Oh, no, that's this week.
Don't worry about that.
Right? I remember looking, I was in this relationship without getting into it. My sponsor says, what are you doing? I said, this is great. She says, what do you mean? I said, I've been with her 6 months. She hasn't tried to stab me. That's progress. I went through my 2-year cake. I was all scratched up, right? She was a normie, right? What we attract sometimes, right? And I thought that was a successful relationship because I had, 3 bad days, but 4 good ones. It used to be 6 bad ones and 1 good one. So that's progress. Anyways, cheese and cracker on the same plate today. Okay, the first requirement.
First requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success.
So how would we be convinced of that? I need to be able to look at my life. And I don't have the ability to look at my life because I look at things, I gaslight myself. Anybody have that ability? I don't see things as they are. My story and somebody else's story of me is 2 different things. I remember arguing with my mom once. That didn't happen. She says, we were sober. So you had to go there, did you?
No argument there.
Yeah, she says, we didn't need the police before you showed up. I said, what are you saying? Okay. So I can't see my life as it actually is because I have certain problems that are temporary, that as soon as I get this, and this, those problems will be taken care of. Anybody have that? And I can't understand why people are treating me the way they are because, look, I'm trying to change, right? Anybody have that? I'm confused of why these people are still treating me the way that they are. Look how nice of a guy I am. I'm clearly misunderstood. Okay, so it's actually, in order to get the same understanding they have, I need to be able to look at my life the same way they did. And that's the fourth step. The fourth step opens the veil. It opens the curtain in the Wizard of Oz. You know that? Remember the guy, like he was and it opened the curtain and there's that guy. There's us. Right. The Wizard of Oz. Okay, I don't know why I go where I go. Give me a nudge sometimes,
I'm letting you do
buddy.
it tonight.
Yeah, go ahead.
Joanne reels you in. I'm not gonna continue with that.
Yeah.
On that basis, we're almost always in a collision with something or somebody. Even though our motives are good, most people try to live by self-propulsion.
Most people. So they're talking about the human dilemma. Humanity. We all have this certain characteristics or certain problems or certain aspects to everybody. The whole human race has it, right? We don't hold the market on it. I don't know, I may find that, who finds that surprising? Some of us are bigger assholes sober than we were drinking.
True story.
Right? Sorry.
Don't fucking look at her.
Looked at his partner over there. She's like, you sing it, brother. Okay. So,
Okay, but what is it?
each person,
Right. Each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballot, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way.
well, how many people sat as the meeting's happening and think, as soon as I do this, as soon as I do that, I'm going to say this to this person, I'm going to say that to that person, I'm going to try not to look through the blinds anymore, right? I'm going to, who's there? I'm going to maybe answer the phone, when it's no call display. That's how you know you're getting well. No call display. We'll let that go to the voicemail. Or when a cop's following you, you don't get the anxiety anymore. Or you go to work and there's an impending doom, like they're all gonna know I've been faking it. Anyway, like me, anybody got squirrels?
It took me almost 3 years being called into my manager's office before I could calm down. Somewhere around 3 or 4 years sober. Before that, I'd be called into the office, and I'd think immediately it was going to be something bad. And, today it's a blessing that we don't have to deal with that.
So here's why we can't look at this and make sense of it. A lot of people read this. I've never met anybody who's ever read this and go, oh my God, that's me.
I'm still waiting for it myself.
Yeah, most of us read it and go, like the first time I went through this, hand to God, I thought, no wonder I have problems. I'm going to go home and leave this on the night table for the girlfriend to read. That's
the problem.
That's her. I phoned Judy, George, the guy who was taking me through. I said, I got another one for you. This one has a lot of... So after the third one, she says, you notice something common between all these women? I said, yeah, they got problems. She says, no, something else. What are you trying to say? Okay, go ahead. So this is us, right? And we don't realize it because most of the stuff that happens in our life happens at a subconscious level. Mm-hmm. And the things that we're dealing with today is predetermined by our experience in the past. So most of us aren't dealing with today's stuff. We're dealing with stuff that based on instinct that had us responding. Does that kind of make sense? Okay, And here's the summary of that. Go ahead.
If his arrangement would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements...
Okay, so here, don't look at your partner and nobody give an elbow. because we all do this, okay? We all do what we're gonna talk about here. And we do it subconsciously. And we're really masters at it. What we're masters at is, anybody ever come to you with a complaint or a concern or a grievance? Mm-hmm. And by the time you're done talking to them, they're apologizing to you? Mm-hmm. She's trying not to give right? Hey, anybody? How many people has had somebody come to you and then leave apologizing to you? Here's the characteristic of that.
In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest, and self-sacrificing.
If you're doing what I want you to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not doing what I want you to do, then we got to get you in line. And it's subtle. Like, I because it's the human condition, mm-hmm. I still find myself falling in that trap. Absolutely. Married, I go, oh boy. Hey, Tony's showing up here. Mm-hmm. And if you want to stay married, you better get rid of that guy right now. Okay, go ahead.
On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits.
And then when we go down here, it talks about what is the basic trouble, right? See, as we go down, because you should read this, we're going to cover it. Is he not, right? What is the basic trouble?
What do you want to cover? Oh, starting right there.
Yep.
Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants?
So then we go over to the next page. And here's why we don't leave you to your own thinking. There we go. Right? And why don't we leave you to your own thinking? How many questions have they asked us so far? Have you noticed that? How many times in the book has it said so far, what do you think? Not once. Right? They say, well, you could choose your own conception based on what we told you. Here's the perimeter of the outline of what the scope we're working with. Choose your own conception of what we're talking about where it makes sense to you. That's the only time they kind of let you, and even then you're supervised, right? So here, and then the first question was, do you have this allergy, yes or no? And then the second one, do you have this malady, yes or no? And if it's I don't know, well, let's go over it again. Right? We'll go over it, case and study. That's the sponsor's job. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have this. Do you need the solution? Yes or no? Maybe. Let's go over it again. Right? Yes, I need the solution. Okay. Are you willing to go to any lengths to get it? Yeah. Are you willing to believe that there's something greater than you, or even willing to be willing? Yeah. And why we don't complicate it anymore? Because we're master manipulators, not only of ourselves, but the world around us. We create a delusion that we move into, that reality has to smash for us to get a moment of clarity. Anybody have had moments of clarity and you've seen yourself as you were and it was crippling? How many people have had those moments of clarity? And they're sure either you do something with that, or you take another drink and it goes away. And it takes another period of time. Because remember, the digression of your life is you participated in. Where alcohol became the master and your whole life became consumed and it became smaller and smaller and smaller. And we think we've lost everybody. See how we think? You hear that? I lost everything. I lost everybody. Anybody ever? That's the delusion. They lost us. They're still waiting for us. Mm-hmm. They're still living their lives. We're the ones that have been removed. See why we don't left to our own? And this covers that. Go ahead. It's the human perplexity, right?
What do you want me to kick off?
Selfish. Why not?
Okay. Page 62. Selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear. Self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity.
100 forms of it. Who's the only one that don't know they're having it? There's a person who's participating in it because you know how to talk to you. You're a master manipulator of yourself. Your brain knows you better than you. Mm-hmm. Okay, try not to have a thought over the next little while. Let's see who's in charge. How many people find themselves thinking about stuff they don't want to think about? Mm-hmm. And how many people's thinking gets better left unchecked? Oh, you think that was fucked up? Try this. Oh, and then it's like you're watching a Stephen King movie and nothing's happening.
The TV's off.
TV's been on for an hour watching a show. You have no idea what happened. Okay. Sorry for my language there. I had a moment.
We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt.
Do I know what that is? Can I clearly see it? No, because my mind has protected me from the truth for years. Because if I was able to see things as they were, I would have probably, well, I did get help a long time, but the inability to stay in that position, right? Each time I thought it was different. Each time I would exert myself hard. Each time treatment, all these things that I was doing to improve my life. But the underlying thing was I didn't have the power to create the longevity, right? So when they talk about this down at the bottom here, the summary of the conclusion is, right, that we had to quit playing God. Or better yet, neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. What's the self-centeredness they're talking about? You thinking about you.
Self on self.
Your problems, your life, the past, the future, this, that, the other thing. What am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about that? What am I going to say about this? How am I going to find out about this? Hope they don't find out about blah, blah, zzz. Anybody have that? You're used to the neighborhood. If anybody came and sat in your brain for a little while, they'd be screaming, there'd be 911, 911. There's people in here that don't like you. Okay, go ahead.
This is the how and why of it?
Yeah.
Bottom of page 62, this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God.
What they meant by that is directing my own life. Because look, how well are you doing governing you? Had to go personal, eh?
It didn't work. Next, we decided that the hereafter, in the drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the father, and we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arc through which we passed freedom.
So this week, you're going to read from the top of 63 to the bottom of 63. And you're going to see what it's saying. So at the top of 63 here, what they're talking about is their experience having gone through the course of action after making a decision. Then they're going to say, if you want to continue with this is how we obtained it. By making a decision to move on to obtain what they... A lot of people read page 60 and said, oh, that's the third step. It's not the third step promise. It's their experience of having gone through this course of action. A lot of people like to say there's no singular promise except for step one. The rest are as the result of all these steps. There's no, I feel good. It's hard to... It's like, until you put the roof on the house is not built. And that's like this spiritual structure that we're building. We need to go as the result of all these steps. Because if you can get benefit by just doing some of these steps, how many people will just do some of these steps? Because if you can get all this by just doing 9 steps, how many people would only do 9 steps? So we see there's a lot of misconceptions happening here. Live long and prosperous. We have the 7th tradition. Read this. We're going to do step 3 next week so you know what meeting to avoid. If you're not ready, then you can sit in the meetings from now on talking about how you did make a decision. So we have the 7th. We don't pass it around. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. We are responsible for paying our own way. That goes for literature, the Zoom, and other things. And the rest we donate to GSO and stuff like that. And for those who can't afford a book, steal it and bring it back around step 9. So what makes for a great life? God. Grant me the serenity to accept things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to live. Appreciate you, brother. Good stuff, man.